Part 1. Micah Rivers stood in the suffocating heat of the courtroom, sweat pooling under his collar. His fists were clenched at his sides, trying not to shake. The thrift store suit hung loose on his skinny frame, the tie borrowed, the shoes scuffed from years of wear. On the bench sat Judge Raymond Harlan, hulking, cruel-eyed, and smirking like he'd already written the ending. He had. Micah's brother, Devin Rivers, had just been sentenced to life without parole for a crime he didn't commit. And the all-white jury had laughed. The gavel slammed. Harlan's voice echoed through the chamber. Life. No appeal. Case closed. Laughter rippled again from the jury box, a low snicker of amusement that twisted in Micah's gut like a knife. No one knew he had spent the past 3 years buried in law books, memorizing codes and legal procedures by flashlight while his peers chased touchdowns and prom dates. No one saw the fire burning in his chest, or how that single moment, the sound of Harlan's gavel, the smirk on his face, would ignite a war. Micah didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. That laugh, Harlan's, kept slicing through his thoughts. His brother was locked in a cell 40 miles outside the city, caged by a system that saw skin color as a verdict. He lay awake, fists clenched under the same thin blanket he used to share with Devin. That suit, still wrinkled, hung by a nail in the wall. He stared at it, jaw tight. He couldn't let that laugh be the end. At sunrise, he sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of cold coffee, surrounded by Devin's case files. He had swiped them from the public defender's office during a lunch break. The files were disorganized, stained, and dog-eared. But to Micah, whose memory was a steel trap, they were gold. Inconsistencies jumped off the pages. A twitchy gas station cashier swore Devin fired the gun. But the timestamps didn't align. And buried in Devin's phone was a blurry photo taken at a barber shop 3 miles away, timestamped minutes after the alleged robbery. Micah typed the appeal himself, hands trembling on a borrowed laptop. Section 32 of State Code gave him 30 days. He was on day 2. By noon, he'd printed everything, stuffed it into a manila envelope, pulled on the wrinkled suit, and walked the 3 blocks to the courthouse. The woman at the clerk's desk, white, mid-50s, with a nameplate that read Rhonda, looked down her nose at him. "Boy," she said, spitting the word like a curse. "You a lawyer?" "I'm his brother," Micah answered, steady. "I have a right to file. State law, Section 32, subsection B." Rhonda sneered and pushed the envelope back. "We don't take trash from children. Get a real attorney." Micah didn't flinch. "Ma'am, refusal to accept this violates my due process rights." Article 9. Rhonda's face turned a dangerous shade of red, but before she could respond, a balding clerk with a lazy eye sauntered over, snatched the envelope, glanced at it, and laughed. "Some black kid thinks he's Perry Mason," he said, tossing the envelope into a tray with other forms. "I'll report this," Micah said coldly. "To the state bar." "You do that?" The man smirked. "Nobody gives a damn." But someone did. By afternoon, Judge Harlan had heard about the filing. Micah was summoned to an emergency hearing. The message came via a courthouse intern, barely older than Micah himself. "4 o'clock," he said. Harlan's pissed. Micah arrived early. Half the courtroom was filled with reporters, bored lawyers, and courthouse regulars. Devin wasn't there, still locked away, but Micah felt his brother's presence in every breath. When Harlan entered, robe flapping like wings, he looked straight at Micah and said, "Mr. Rivers, explain this foolishness before I have you removed for contempt." Micah approached the podium. His voice trembled on the first words but steadied with each sentence. "Your Honor, I'm filing an appeal." Devin's trial was flawed. His counsel didn't challenge testimony. And he wasn't at the scene. Laughter erupted. Harlan waved a hand to quiet it. "You sound like a boy playing dress-up," the judge sneered. "Sit down." But Micah didn't sit. He opened his notebook and pointed to a line on a court transcript. Page 17, line 42. The prosecution's closing argument went over the court's deadline. 8 minutes. Rule 6.3 says that voids the verdict. He slid the transcript to the bench. Harlan snatched it, read the line, and his smirk vanished. The room went silent. Micah pressed on. "The law says you have to grant a retrial." Harlan's face flushed. A vein pulsed in his neck. He slammed the transcript down, grabbed the gavel, and growled, "Fine. Retrial granted. But don't think you've won." The gavel slammed again. Court adjourned. Micah walked out in a haze of disbelief and adrenaline. Reporters followed him like bloodhounds. He barely noticed. He'd done it. He cracked the wall. Until he saw Harlan in the courtroom doorway, phone to his ear, face twisted in hate. "Handle the kid," the judge snarled into the phone. Micah's stomach dropped. He'd won a battle. But Harlan wasn't done. Not even close. Part 2. The Retribution. The courthouse steps were still echoing Micah's footsteps when the unmarked cruiser screeched around the corner. He barely made it 2 blocks from the judicial fortress when the sirens wailed, and 2 plainclothes officers in dark blue windbreakers flung their doors open. Micah Rivers, the taller one, barked, hand already on his weapon. Micah froze, the envelope with the retrial order still tucked into his armpit. I didn't do anything. The shorter cop, burly and red-faced, stepped in with a smirk. That's funny. We heard you're impersonating legal counsel and falsifying documents. Judge Whitmore's real unhappy. Before Micah could respond, the taller one grabbed him by the shoulder and slammed him onto the hood. His cheek hit hot metal, the breath knocked from his lungs. You think this is a game, boy? The burly cop spat as he twisted Micah's arm behind his back. I filed an appeal, Micah gasped. Under state law. That's my right. The cuffs bit into his wrists. They shoved him into the back seat. One of the cops pulled out a small plastic bag filled with what looked like marijuana and held it up with a grin. What's this, huh? Yours. Micah's heart plummeted. I've never seen that before. Of course you haven't, the tall one chuckled. The cruiser pulled away, gravel spitting beneath its tires. Micah's neighborhood blurred past the window as they headed not toward a precinct, but an abandoned lot on the industrial edge of town. The moment they parked, the burly cop yanked Micah out, dragging him to a rusted shipping container. This is what happens when you make trouble for the wrong people, the officer hissed. Inside the container, the air was suffocating. Micah's wrists were chained to a pipe above his head. The beatings began soon after. Punches, kicks, a baton slammed against his ribs. The smell of rust and blood mixed with the sour tang of sweat. You think you're smarter than the system? The tall one snarled between blows. Judge Whitmore runs this city. You're just a ghetto genius with a death wish. Micah stopped feeling the pain after a while. His body went numb, but his mind stayed sharp. Section 19 of the State Civil Rights Code, Protection from Excessive Force. Section 7.4, Right to report abuse by public officers. He filed it all away. 3 days later, they dumped him at the hospital entrance. Broken nose. 2 cracked ribs. Split lip. No charges filed. No arrest record. Just a warning. Stay down. But Micah didn't. He limped back to Ms. Carter's house, his old social worker and now his unofficial guardian angel. She looked at him, eyes wide with horror. Jesus Christ, Micah, she whispered. They tried to kill you. They tried to scare me, he corrected, collapsing onto her couch. She tended to his wounds silently. That night, while he lay on her pull-out bed with a bag of frozen peas on his ribs, the TV blared breaking news. Protesters had begun gathering outside the courthouse. A local journalist had picked up Micah's story after a court clerk anonymously leaked footage of Judge Whitmore mocking him in open court. The video had gone viral. #retrial for Rivers. #justice for Micah. The internet had done what the justice system would not. It paid attention. Micah watched the footage, his own face, bruised, trembling, standing before Whitmore as the judge sneered. The comments flooded in. Kid's a hero. Corrupt judge exposed. This is why we fight. But Micah's stomach churned. He knew better. This was the moment the real retaliation would begin. Whitmore's world was made of favors, secrets, and leverage. And now Micah was a threat. That night, Ms. Carter's house was firebombed. They barely made it out. Neighbors saw the flames rise from the kitchen window. By the time the fire trucks arrived, the house was a skeleton. Micah stood barefoot in the wet grass, watching the smoke twist into the night sky, still clutching the flash drive with Darnell's alibi photo. They're sending a message, Ms. Carter said, coughing from the smoke. But they don't know you. Micah didn't answer. He already had a plan forming. He would bring it all down. The judge. The cops. The DA. The system that had destroyed his brother's life. That had tried to kill him twice. That burned down a home just to make a point. And it would start with that flash drive. Part 3, The Reckoning. Micah didn't sleep that night. He sat on the curb across from the smoldering wreck of Ms. Carter's home, the flash drive clutched tight in his hand. His ribs ached. His throat burned from the smoke. But his mind was alive, sharper than it had ever been. By dawn, he was gone. He didn't tell Ms. Carter where he was going. She would have stopped him. Or worse, she would have tried to help. And Micah couldn't afford another casualty. He had one mission now. Expose them all. Micah's first stop was a rundown internet cafe downtown, the kind of place no one noticed anymore. He used cash. Rented the back booth. Plugged in the flash drive. Darnell's photo lit up the screen. Timestamped, geolocated, irrefutable. His brother had been at a birthday party across town when the shooting happened. The metadata checked out. The original file hadn't been doctored. Micah uploaded it to a secure server and sent it to every news outlet with a subject line that burned. Exonerate my brother or prove you're complicit. But that was just the beginning. Micah had spent months studying legal databases, open records laws, whistleblower protections. Now, he used them like weapons. He filed a formal complaint with the State Judicial Conduct Board, complete with footage of Judge Whitmore mocking him, the leaked audio of prosecutors laughing about railroading the Rivers boy, and a notarized affidavit from a former bailiff who'd overheard the DA say, better an innocent black kid behind bars than a guilty one with a vendetta. He submitted a federal civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983 against the officers who beat him, attaching photos of his injuries, hospital reports, and timestamps from the firebombing. And he wasn't alone. The hashtag had sparked a movement. Civil rights lawyers reached out. Law students offered research support. A former FBI agent who'd once investigated local corruption cases sent him sealed documents, ones that showed years of suspicious rulings under Whitmore's bench. Micah didn't just have a case anymore. He had an army. The courthouse, once a symbol of fear, became a war zone of accountability. Protesters flooded the steps every day. Local media turned national. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News reluctantly ran the headline. Youth legal prodigy takes on corrupt system and wins? Whitmore's camp tried to strike back. Anonymous articles appeared calling Micah a fraud, claiming he was mentally unstable, an imposter, a gang sympathizer. They even tried to leak a juvenile record that didn't exist. But Micah anticipated it all. At a live press conference hosted by the Southern Justice League, he stepped to the podium with a cane under his arm and steel in his eyes. The cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. My name is Micah Rivers, he began, voice clear despite the bruises. I am not a lawyer. I am a citizen. I am a brother. And I am tired of waiting for justice to happen. He held up the flash drive. This contains proof that Darnell Rivers is innocent. The state has had this evidence for 8 years. They buried it. They lied. They let an innocent black boy rot in prison because the truth was inconvenient. Gasps from the crowd. The DA's office released a statement that same evening. We will reopen the case. But it was too late for damage control. Judge Whitmore was suspended pending an ethics investigation. His bank records were subpoenaed, revealing secret donations from private prison contractors. 2 officers resigned before they could be fired. Micah's civil rights case moved forward. The FBI launched a broader inquiry into the Charleston Judicial Circuit. And finally, Darnell was released. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed. Micah stood beside his brother, now 25, who had missed nearly a decade of life. They embraced in silence. But when the judge offered Micah a nod of recognition, he didn't return it. Instead, he turned to the crowd. This isn't victory, Micah said. This is survival. And we shouldn't have to earn our humanity by being nearly beaten to death for it. The room went silent. And then applause. Weeks later, as the media cycle moved on and the headlines faded, Micah returned to Ms. Carter's rebuilt home. They sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea. You did it, she said softly. Micah shook his head. No, we just made it harder for them to pretend. A breeze passed through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, not with menace this time, but with meaning. Micah leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long time, he let himself breathe. The end.